Mhm.
So is the accents from English or Indonesian kind of seeps into
I'm
your
I'm glad
German?
I'm glad you asked because I want to flex. This is a flex.
Okay, so I want to move on to the second part. Do you feel like you're losing any language you're speaking right now?
To be honest, yeah. My Indonesian a little bit actually. Um, I wouldn't say it's actually losing it. It's more of my confidence actually because the other day I had to write an email to the Consulat Jenderal KJRI in here because I had some issues and then I wasn't sure how to write an email in Indonesian because I haven't written one in so long. So I asked my friend, hey, tolong cek dong ini bahasa Indonesia udah bener apa belum, bagus apa enggak. And she's like, yeah, it's really good. So, okay. So yeah, it's just the
But
confidence.
you're still confident about your Javanese?
Yes, actually, funny enough, I feel like such a hypocrite for doing this, but every time I go back to Indonesia and meet my friends in real life, I do tell them, oh, I'm not really good in Javanese. Um, so like I prefer speaking Indonesian, but then whenever I get the chance, um, to speak with them in social media, I kind of just automatically switch to Japanese. Yeah, that.
Do you have any friends there that speaks either Javanese or Indonesian with you?
I do have a housemate that speaks Indonesian. Unfortunately he's from Jakarta, so he doesn't speak Japanese. But actually
Mm.
here in my university, most of the Indonesians are from Surabaya. So not only Javanese but
Oh,
also
okay.
Surabaya Javanese. Like,
Then
yeah,
when you guys gather together, do you speak in which language?
I first of all, I don't really hang out with them a lot. Um,
Okay.
Second, um, okay, we're talking about these other sort of bands. Yes, yes. Actually, it would be a mix. Actually, it would be a mix of English, Indonesian, Japanese. A bit more to the English, but there's still a fair bit of Japanese.
Then I want to ask about your accents. Because
Yeah,
when you speak Indonesian, you still have kayak a Mado
yeah.
accent.
Uh-huh.
When you speak English, it's you can still
Australian.
hear the Australian influence, yeah.
Yeah.
What about when you speak German?
Ooh.
Because like
Uh,
you're not exactly fluent at it, right? Not like how you
that's
are
right.
fluent in English.
Mhm.
So is the accents from English or Indonesian kind of seeps into
I'm
your
I'm glad
German?
I'm glad you asked because I want to flex. This is a flex. My German friends always tell me like, "Hey, you have a really good German accent." Like, "Ah, thank you." Every time I speak German to them, although not always because sometimes like because German R is a little bit um, um, not vague, but not very apparent. So, like for example, there's a word called responsibility, which is if without the German accent, it would be Verantwortung. So the Verantwortung. But with the German accent, the R's kind of disappear, so it becomes Verantwortung. And yeah, like you really don't hear the R, and sometimes I would just purposely emphasize the R, so there's no
Mm.
misunderstanding. Mhm.
Is that
Okay, so,
because you're self-study?
mm, I don't know what to say. I think I have this affinity to try to copy what I hear or what I see. Actually, I think I would say that's mostly how I do most of my learning. Is I see or listen and then I do it.
Then how often do you switch between English and German?
I try to increase the amount of times when I is this like when I'm speaking to myself or speaking with other people.
In general, if you want to like talk about them specifically,
Okay,
it's also
well,
fine.
when I'm talking with other people, it really depends. Some people really don't speak German, or like we're just very comfortable speaking English, so we speak in English. The Indonesian friends, I would just speak in Indonesian or even Japanese. Um, but most of the Germans here are pretty fluent in English, and they notice and they realize that most of the international students here don't speak German, so they kind of just switch to English. There's this one time I try to join in a German conversation between my German friends, and like I spoke something in German, and then I kind of stuttered. They're like, just say it in English. Like, oh, okay. It was a little bit embarrassing, but they do have a point. But when I'm speaking to myself, I do try to speak German. And actually, if you look at my Insta stories, sometimes I do speak in German because I just want to make myself comfortable.
Then, because German people will have a German accent when they're speaking English.
Not always.
Okay, not always, but
Mhm.
when you hear that, do you sometimes kayak keep that in your head, kayak store it, and then sometimes when you say something, you unconsciously say it in like this German accent, or
Ah,
has that ever happened to you?
yes. I wouldn't say I purposely or like unconsciously put on a German accent. But I do actually. I've also done this when I was in Australia. When I notice that I'm speaking to somebody who is not fluent or native in English, um, I would put on a different accent that is a little bit more neutral, I guess you would say. So just once again, just so that there's no misunderstanding, just like with the R in German words.
Then you said about your Javanese, it's still more attached to you than in Indonesian, right?
No, I think my Japanese is a little bit like my German. I kind of do it for fun.
But it's still very prevalent. Like sometimes apa
Prevalent.
ya, prevalent. Sometimes you just speak in Japanese. Like when you hang out with me, when we're in
Uh-huh.
Indo, when you visit
Mm.
Jakarta, you
Oh,
switch to Japanese a lot. Does that
there
still
is
happen in?
in Germany. About what you said with when I come visit you in Jakarta. I think it's more because there's this subconscious, not subconscious. I keep on thinking that Japanese is almost the same as Indonesian, so people should
Mm.
kind of understand me anyway. So I don't realize that I speak when I was saying something in Japanese. Like, oh, so like, you don't understand that. Yeah. In here, when I speak to my roommate, who's once again who's Sudanese, like if he doesn't understand, then I would just tell him, oh, it means this.
What about your
So
language switch? Like, how do you switch between languages when you're around friends? Have you ever kayak been keceplosan when you talk to a friend and then
yes I have. Although most of the time it's not actually it's very rare. It's very rarely actual words. Like for example, like if I say something and then I say and then I make a kesalahan. No, so it's not like that. It's usually like expressions or onomatopoeia. So like instead of saying "Oh my god," like when I talk like "Oh my god," I would sometimes say like
have you ever had to explain what you said to people that may not understand?
no, because they're just sounds at the end of the day. So they
Fair
just
enough.
assume like, oh, it's not nothing important. Yeah.
Then, like, when you text, do you consciously switch to German?
Um, I get to the German in a bit, but when I switch languages, when I text between English, Indonesian, and sometimes Japanese, it's because especially if the other person understands multiple languages, it's because I reach a phrase that I want to say that I only know in another language. So I would just yeah I would
Mm.
just change. Um, yeah. But when it's German, sometimes it's because slow brain movement, and I was just speaking German like previously, or yeah, so like I couldn't think of what the word is in not German. Um, sometimes I just want to mess with people.
Then I want to ask about like your thought processes when you
Mhm.
speak these languages. Because as
Yeah.
you said, sometimes it's like a slow response when you want to speak
Mhm.
this certain language, but you spoke this other language previously. It still affects your current speech. How does that ever hinder your day-to-day life?
What I'm Okay, lately I've been at home, so I don't really speak to anybody. Um,
Fair enough.
so it doesn't really happen that often. But I do remember when back when we still had offline classes, because it was mostly English anyway. I didn't really have to worry about accidentally saying like having to say something in Indonesian, unless I
Mm.
meet another person that is in Indonesian, and then I would just submerge myself in a different conversation altogether. But with German, it still very rarely happens because we just rarely use German in our university.
One last question about your language usage.
Yeah.
How do you choose which language you want to speak to a certain person?
Well, uh, my default language is always English. So yeah, like it's always English. Even with Indonesians, some like I would start speaking with Indonesian with them once I know that they're Indonesian. But I would like kind of tell them like, oh yeah, but I'm also very comfortable speaking English. I'm actually more comfortable speaking English. So sometimes I'll just change the English with them. With German, it has to depend because once again, most of the Germans here just kind of switch to English. Sometimes I would just speak German with my German friends, like people who can understand German. Yeah, I'll
Does your parent
German.
ever mention how you should understand more Indonesian, or like they mention that they're maybe disappointed at you for not having like an expert knowledge of your mother language?
Okay. Well, thankfully they don't do that. They don't do the same to me about Japanese. They do kind of have like that kind of attitude towards my brother for Japanese, but not for me. But for Indonesian, I think they're completely fine. Sometimes they do show concern that like if I'm speaking enough Indonesian or like if I'm retaining still enough Indonesian or not. They try to speak English to me or my brother because they try to improve their English, but in Indonesian. First of all, before I continue, I do want to mention that if it's not obvious enough, um, since I'm from Surabaya, my Javanese is very ngoko. Australian English really loves to abbreviate everything. Like for example, McDonald's becomes Macca's. Actually, fun fact,
Mm.
like here we in Germany, like sometimes McDonald's is also just written as Macca's. You've obviously heard of the stereotype that German words are very long. It's because there is this ability in German language called compounding. It's where you just basically take two words and you put them together.